Many people imagine the Romans as builders of colossal stone structures such as the Colosseum, but rarely wonder why they did not build classic medieval-style castles. The Romans had enough resources to construct something similar. However, they preferred to build forts, functional and precisely calculated structures. This choice was not accidental and reflected the logic of the Roman army. In this video, we will explain why forts perfectly fit Roman needs, whereas castles did not. To begin with, every Roman fortification was designed to meet the needs of an army that lived by strict regulations. Legionaries were not only soldiers but also builders, capable of constructing a fort in a single day. Each soldier knew his exact task thanks to standards developed by engineers. This uniformity made forts fast, cheap, and reliable. Castles, on the other hand, required individual designs and long construction times, often taking decades, incompatible with Roman mobility. The Roman army needed structures that could be quickly deployed and just as quickly abandoned. Thus, forts were part of a strategy of constant movement rather than static territorial defense. Every Roman fort had a rectangular plan divided into segments according to a strict template. This geometry made it easy to enlarge or reduce the structure depending on the size of the garrison. Castles, by contrast, were shaped by the terrain and the needs of a feudal lord. The Romans preferred predictability to simplify supply and logistics. Inside the fort were barracks, warehouses, and headquarters arranged with engineering precision. This made troop movement inside the fort easier during an attack. Castles followed a different logic: maximum protection for a specific person or family and high autonomy. Their layout was more chaotic but advantageous for defense in hills or mountains. Romans had no use for such a design because they were not defending feudal estates. They were protecting roads, camps, imperial borders, and trade routes. The Romans widely used wood, turf, and stone, choosing materials based on local availability and military needs. A wooden fort could be dismantled and moved. Stone forts appeared only in places where troops stayed for long periods. Castles, however, were built almost entirely from stone, making them durable but difficult and slow to build. Roman engineers used concrete, a revolutionary material that sped up construction, but it was applied mainly to civilian buildings, not military camps. In Roman strategy, no location was planned centuries ahead, so a temporary structure was considered perfectly acceptable. Forts functioned as nodes in a vast defensive network. Each fort could signal neighboring forts using towers and beacons. This allowed legions to concentrate on a threatened area within hours. Castles, by contrast, were designed for long isolation and autonomous survival. The Romans had no need for this approach because their power relied on an exceptionally strong and mobile army. Castle logic simply did not fit the structure of an ever-expanding empire. Low, long walls provided excellent visibility. The Romans valued the ability to see the enemy approaching. The lower height of Roman walls was compensated by numerous watch posts. Forts were also surrounded by ditches and earthen ramparts. This complex was quick to build and effective against sudden raids. Forts allowed legionaries to form battle lines rapidly. Castles were designed for defense from within and could withstand years-long sieges. The Romans preferred active operations, forcing the enemy into open field battles. Castles are symbols of feudal fragmentation and personal power. The Romans were different. Authority came from the emperor and the senate. Officers did not own land and did not turn fortifications into personal citadels. A fort was a state facility, not a private stronghold. That is why castle architecture emerged only after centralized power collapsed. Building a castle required enormous funds and decades of work. For Rome, such an approach would have been economically impractical. It was far more efficient for the empire to build many medium-sized fortifications than a single giant castle. This mass approach offered a strategic advantage. The enemy could not destroy all sites at once. Roman forts were strong enough to hold out until reinforcements arrived. Resource efficiency allowed Rome to maintain an enormous defensive network throughout Europe. Castle-style construction would have made this network extremely sparse. Thus, choosing forts was economically rational. The Romans aimed for optimal efficiency, not maximal monumentality. Economics directly confirms the strategic wisdom of Roman planning. Most of Rome's enemies were so-called barbarians, and they were impressed by the very existence of an organized military camp. Straight lines, walls, and a ditch turned the area into Roman space. Forts became centers of Roman culture on the fringes of the known world. Towns, trade, and Romanization grew around them. Castles emerged only after the centralized Roman army disappeared. Each local lord had to build his own fortification in an era of chaos. The Romans never had such a need. This is why castle architecture is not a continuation but the opposite of Roman fortification systems. When logistics collapsed, The fort network collapsed with it. It was replaced by the defense of individual families rather than empires. And this is the main explanation for why the Romans never built castles. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.